So everyone, even though this episode was more or less self-contained from the main story of Titans, it was an amazing episode all about Hawk and Dove, or should I say Hank and Dawn. Let's get straight into this because seriously, this was one of the best superhero-y kind of episodes in any show I've watched possibly ever. How's it going, Titans? Welcome to my episode review for Hank and Dawn, which was episode 9. Now, as a lot of people thought this would be, this was more or less a self-contained story about the origin of them. Now, I know some people were thinking, wasn't Hawk and Dove that? Well, not really, because this episode really dives into the superhero origins of how they became those superheroes, Hawk and Dove, or should I say vigilantes. But what I really liked about how well they handled this episode is that they promoted quite a few messages of stuff that happens in real life. For example, this was a really unsettling, emotional, and just in-depth episode tackling real life issues such as abuse, nonsensical death and accidents that happen, and how just sometimes things happen and you have no one to blame. No, like, it's unfair. Life can be unfair. That was one of the lines in this episode. And I just found this episode really emotional because I could really relate to the whole nonsensical death part and what Hawk and Dove were both going through in this episode and how they found each other. I don't know. It was just a really powerful message. And I do get how this episode was seemingly beforehand placed randomly, like a break from the story, but it does tie in nicely as to how Raven needed Hawk and Dove's help to help her from what is going on with Starfire. But we'll get all into this in a second, guys, so subscribe if you're brand new to this channel, of course, for more Titans reviews just like this and breakdowns, and of course like the video if you do go on to enjoy this review, and like it as well if you just love Hawk and Dove. Now, one of my favorite things about this episode was just that very beginning bit where we saw a very newbie Hawk and Dove, or should I say Hank and Don, his brother Don, or who he likes to call Donnie. They were basically filming, beating the crap out of a guy, and we'll get into like the narrative of who they're going after in a second. But you can just tell immediately when you don't really have much context to this episode that it's obviously a flashback, but he's wearing like football gear, and they're just two young guys, especially Hank really, wanting to become superheroes and help out. And just the line was like, Batman and Robin, you've got company. It was just like really sweet, and it was like a really cool origin story, even though it felt like realistic, like you could go out there and dress up and be a superhero yourself. Obviously that isn't so realistic, but the way they kind of portrayed it on screen made it seem like these two guys really wanting to seek out and do good, especially Hank being the victim, the original victim that is, of what he went through when he was younger, forged him into the man we know later in present day, but we see those beginnings here, and I just found it like really cool. Now, even though Hank and Dawn haven't been in Titans much really, I mean apart from their own episode, and then we saw like Robin go visit them when she was still in the coma, I honestly love these characters. I really like the actors. I feel like they were perfectly cast, and I'm just really happy that, I mean, from the end of the episode, they're going to hopefully be in the next episode, and they're all going to meet up, I guess, with what is going down with Starfire, and, you know, the fact that they're going to go after and help Raven out. Now, diving into the mini Hank and mini Donnie moments, now this episode went very dark with the coach. Now, we had the coach wanting to take Hank's younger brother to the weight room. I don't really have to get into that, like in terms of what kind of abuse was going to go down there. But what we saw in the episode was his older brother Hank take that fall for Donnie. Obviously, he didn't understand what the heck was going on. Hank, even though he was young as well, knew exactly what was going on, but managed to get Donnie away, but proceeded to go with the coach into the weight room. This was really disturbing stuff, but at the same time, this is stuff that happens in real life. And obviously this tied into that main story already with what we even saw at the beginning of the episode, with how we saw the video recordings of these two going after the predators within their local area, beating the crap out of them to plead guilty because they evidently were guilty but got off somehow because the system is failing them. So it's a very superhero origin story in a way, with that kind of element, but mixed in with some real messed up issues, which was really hard to watch and really hard to see, but makes you really understand the characters, like kind of motivations and origins and just emotional depth so much more than what I really really thought, to be honest. But then everyone, we flip to the college football days where Don and Hank are a lot older. Typically, this is at no surprise to me that Hank, he's definitely a nice guy, but he comes across as that kind of high school / college jock. I mean, he is that kind of footballer going around the party, like everyone knows who he is. But at the same time, he's not like a total arsehole or anything. But the thing is, just like what we saw in episode 2, Hawk and Dove, I think it was episode 2, he suffered an injury, and that's what we saw from Don's perspective. And he had a concussion, and obviously football to him is everything, like it, sports is to a lot of people. So he kept tending to ignore the injuries, and this is another thing. It highlighted another thing that people tend to do, ignore like their health, or ignore things that probably a lot of people in sports do when they should take the rest. I really like how Don, who is obviously Dove in this early days of Hawk and Dove, was wearing a Superman t-shirt, just like Dawn, the Dove, was way back in episode 2 of this season. But talking about the injuries that Hank had suffered and tried to keep ignoring and putting behind him, he passed out at that party, and then he went to the doctors and he had like a post-concussion syndrome, which can get very, very dangerous, especially if you keep ignoring it, getting more injuries that can become permanent brain damage. And as we know, he's not like fully even Hawk and Dove at this point at all, but like way into the future, into present day, we know how much he deals with pain management. So he obviously does a similar thing when he's like a vigilante. He probably needs a lot more rest than what he gives himself in between going out with Dawn as Hawk and Dove. But it seems that he keeps going out even in the present day, like in all the behind scenes or like the past that we just haven't seen of Hank and Dawn going out as Hawk and Dove. It seems to be just something that Hank tries to pretend that he doesn't have to deal with, and that's why we see medication everywhere. That's why we saw him go into that hospital room, break into it, and pop even more pills, and that's how, he got into his dream state. But I really like how the episode shows Dove's kind of dream state as well, whilst Raven was trying to wake them the hell up to get some help. But then we had that moment in the episode in the library where Hank, kind of lost his crap. I mean, I get it from both sides, because Don calls the playoff director, and that got him benched. Because obviously he was thinking, I want to help my brother here and not get him permanent brain damage. Obviously people lost their crap in the library, and this was a really cool moment. I definitely thought that this was believable, and it kind of gave them that realization, maybe like they're pretty badass, because they fought a few other college people. They gave the explanation behind it. I'm guessing Hank is just badass, and then Don did extracurricular like jujitsu or martial arts or whatever it was. But as a result of this, they got kicked out of school. Don kind of egged that on. But essentially, this was leading up to the whole system thing anyway. It's like, screw the system. They failed our mother when she was sick. School is like this. Hank's given everything, like his health. Now, I like that moment in the episode where they realized that they could do more, but this is when as well that Don kind of admitted that he knew to Hank about the abuse that took place when they were kids. I'm guessing not at the time of obviously when he was that young, but the penny would have dropped at some point and he would have realized what his brother sacrificed for him to protect him. But obviously Hank didn't want to talk about it. He couldn't face it. Just like everything with Hank, so it seems. And this isn't, unnatural to do at all. He tried to ignore it, bury it, and not make it something that was real, just like his injuries in football. Not make that real, just press on, go forth, and just, pretend everything's okay, really. So essentially what they set out to do, just like how it kind of goes back to Hank's origins of being abused by the coach, is find all those predators on the map. But just diving into the Dove, or should I say Dawn side of things, because she was in her coma and this was her like part of the episode. I found it very interesting as well how they decided to tackle the very, very real issues of how her mother was getting abused, and how she's even faced some of that from her mother's boyfriend or husband or whoever it is. I think it's the boyfriend. But yeah, again, it just highlights the issue of how the mother, they were having that conversation over afternoon tea of how she was talking to Dawn about potentially going back to him. And now Dawn was absolutely infuriated by the idea of this, because it's like, why would you do that? But yet again, I'm not going to get too deep into this because I'm not an expert, but that is a thing that happens, with plenty of victims. I loved their reaction when they saw on the Washington paper or whatever, that it said, masked vigilantes did what police couldn't, Hawk and Dove. Now this is where I personally found the episode really kind of hard to watch, but also really kind of meaningful and impactful, like in kind of a good way, because they tackled the fact, especially when they were going to like the group griefing counseling thing, Hank didn't really turn up. Dawn went there every time, but she had that like particular line of like, why can't life be fair? Because the coach will like why does stuff happen for no reason? Sometimes, when people pass away, they pass away for a reason, right? They might be ill and you might be expecting it. I'm not negating the sadness out of that, but when nonsensical death happens because of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, sometimes it's just hard for the brain to compute that, and it takes a heck of a long time to get over anything like that. And obviously that is exactly what brought these two characters together, because Hank and Dawn both lost their mother and their brother because of the exact same accident, so they could help each other get through it. And that was something I really loved about this episode as well. I loved that little, it may sound a little cheesy, but I just love that little love kind of montagey music moment in the episode where Dawn was taking Hank to like afternoon tea, and they were just basically falling in love, being there for each other. But this is when in the episode, after getting to know each other for quite a little bit, I'm guessing over time, Hank brought Dove back to his apartment. He was setting up her a place on the sofa to sleep, and she was getting a pillow, but that is when the bag fell of the old Hawk and Dove gear. But either way, I really like that sit down conversation they had, and we got that kind of understanding from Hank's perspective as to why he kind of puts things behind him, because as he said in his own words, that would make it real, because he was asked to tell her about his real deep issues, and that was about the coach in the weight room stuff, and he just never went after him despite going after all those other predators, because he would then have to live up to the fact that it actually happened. That didn't mean that this didn't also infuriate Dawn, so she went after the coach into his house and was essentially beating the living crap out of him, just saying like, you need to admit what you did to Hank, you need to like call the police and turn yourself in. But he confronted his kind of fear and went after her, which would involve seeing the coach once again for the first time. And this was really kind of tough to watch at the same time, because even though it felt really good seeing Hawk get his kind of his piece, and taking it out on that coach after all this time, and that coach getting what he freaking deserved. And I really do give credit to Alan Ritchson, who plays Hawk here. Like, the way his facial expressions were in that moment and everything when he saw him, man, that was just, I don't know, it's just great acting. Anyway, that guy got beat the F up. At the same time, Dove obviously found even more pictures on his computer, and that just essentially motivated them even more to beat the living crap out of him. And that is what kind of formed the Hawk and Dove thing from here on out, because we've known from previous episodes, from when Robin's helped them out as well. They do a lot of missions, like they're not necessarily Batman and Robin level stuff, but they do more things to help out the neighborhood and help out it's kind of like, you've got the Avengers kind of level, Justice League level stuff, but then you have like Daredevil of, Hell's Kitchen doing stuff around to try and keep the city and the neighborhood kind of safe. That is like what Hawk and Dove, what I can liken it to, if that makes sense, with the kind of missions they embark upon. But either way, I was left wondering throughout the episode, obviously, as I've mentioned a couple of times, Rachel/Raven was doing the long distance calling, trying to get Hank to wake up from his sedated state, because that's how he was knocked out in the episode, in the waiting room, or in Dawn's room, should I say, and Dawn was obviously in a coma, but it was Dawn who woke up first. So I'm wondering if, obviously, Raven has the abilities to heal others. You have to think, yeah, maybe Dawn did wake up from a coma, and it was around about time she would have naturally done that. But maybe I choose to believe that Raven has a little bit of long distance ability in the healing factor. I don't know. A little bit of comic book logic there. I think that's fine to do that. But this is when we got that moment where Dove was just like on Hank saying, we need to find Jason Todd. Rachel's in trouble. We need to go after them. So it looks like Jason Todd is returning. I'm really happy about that. But I'm also really hoping that this ends up in a Titans kind of thing, Hawk and Dove kind of thing, with Jason Todd, with Donna Troy. Like, can you imagine seeing all of them on the screen? Like, I really hope that's the case. But either way, guys, I love this episode. I do get how it was filler, and, to place that gap in between was a little bit somewhat random, but at the same time it connected to the overall story. But the thing is, even after seeing it, you just feel like these characters deserve that whole episode, because I felt like it was just spectacular. I would love to know what you guys thought down in the comments below. I'd have to admit, even though I've seen a lot of filler comments out there before they've seen the episode, I'd be very surprised if a lot of people trashed on this episode for it still just being filler and bad, because I just don't see that at all. But from the preview of the next episode, guys, it looks very, very cool. We see Wondergirl. A lot of complaints from the Donna Troy episode was that we didn't see, even though she was awesome and a lot of people agreed upon that, we didn't really see Donna Troy as in Wondergirl. But here we see Wondergirl with the freaking lasso of like truth, where it technically might not be that one, but she would obviously perhaps have her own one in the Titans universe, similar to Diana's Wonder Woman's. But you know what I mean. Holy crap, does this freaking screenshot that I've taken, and you're probably seeing on screen right now, look incredible. And obviously she's tackling Corey here, slash Starfire, from throttling Raven. But other than that, guys, subscribe to the channel if you're brand new, of course, to never miss out on a Titans video, and like it if you did enjoy it. But thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you Titans in the next video. Goodbye.